Hello, this is Max Drake. I'd like to carry on talking about this app that I'm doing here. So this one is a PWA. So that's a progressive web app, and it's based, I'm trying to actually in some ways mirror what I've actually got on my Glide app. But as I'm going through this and reflecting on it, I'm actually thinking that I can make some different changes. Now, why am I doing this? The reason why is that the Glide app has got to load up. So it's a web page app, so it actually works on Android and Apple and stuff like that. And so does a progressive web app. But what progressive web apps allow you to do is to work offline, or if you've actually got poor connection. So you can actually just turn your phone off and it'll still work blazingly fast. And I actually have noticed a big difference of the one time when I actually took it out and tried it out, that it actually was a hell of a lot faster than this one, because when I'm on the cellular network, it takes a while to actually load up the app, whereas if it's actually a PWA, it's just firing up straight away. So from this point of view, that's the reason why we're going through this one. But the downside of it is I've got to do an awful lot of coding. Now, this is using JavaScript doing that, and we're using the Firebase Firestore as the database in behind. So it's cloud Firebase, and one of the things it's a noSQL database. And so I had an awful lot of trouble with some of my information in it. So one of the things that I actually had early on was actually I was using inside the database, I was using a string, a number for my date. And it was an epoch date, and you could just suddenly say, is it after this or is it before this? So you can actually put a number at the start of the month, say, show me everything after the start of the month. So that's dead easy. When I actually changed it to a timestamp, because I thought, oh, well, that's really what I should be doing, it actually caused me a massive amount of grief. Instead of displaying as a number through here, it actually displays as date and time, which is fine. But when you try and organize things or order things through there, it just ended up being really frustrating. The other thing that actually happened, I suddenly got date, time, and also time zones, and the New Zealand time zone. So I ended up with this long string through there, and I couldn't reduce it down to just the simple date. So I found that really frustrating. So I ended up going backwards and just going back to what I actually had in the database of actually just keeping it as a string. It works fantastic. Second thing that I was trying to do was I was trying to get the sum data to come through as a number. And I blew this collection away about 5 or 6 times because I was trying to push a number into here. But for some unknown reason, the process that I'm actually doing, taking it from an index through here, where I'm actually writing it through as a type number, somehow when it comes through onto the form and through this query selector and things like this, is changing this from a number to a string. Now, I did test it out on another one through here where I just put a number in there and pushed that in, and that came through as a number, and inside the database it comes through as a number. And when I was actually watching a whole lot of videos on how to do it, none of them really gave me an explanation on how to do that. So I was a bit frustrated. Although here it talks about doing it, but it doesn't explain. Like you see here, to get the timestamp, you've actually got to go Firebase Firestore timestamp, and then you've got to do another couple of things before you can actually get it through as a timestamp. So it doesn't, if you just put a timestamp number in there, it doesn't come through as that. So there's a little bit of jiggery pokery that you've got to do with that. So anyway, after hammering around with all of that, and really it was just bugging me that I actually really just wanted my data to be in a number format, because it being a noSQL database, I can't use a sum. So I can't use an SQL query and just go give us a sum of all of that low on the table through there. So I had 2 choices at the time. I could either use a cloud function to actually work on that, which I didn't want to do because I didn't want to do another tool coming through here. Or the other one is that I do it client side. So in the end, I did do it client side. But what I ended up having to do to make that work was I actually had to do 2 snapshots. So I then have to do 2 calls to the database and pull the information back out. And it's basically the same information. One I'm actually just doing it descending and the other one's ascending through here. And then I'm rendering them separately. Now inside the UI, so I've got my first one, which is actually coming through and going through and iterating all of my cards with all of my information of each particular bill coming through. But I also do another one through here, is that when it does the snapshot, it gets the data and I go and get the data.sum for each particular document, and then I use a ParseFloat on it. So that's a JavaScript thing that actually takes a string and changes the string to a number. So that's what I do there, and I put it into a constant called y, and then I actually set up a whole load of empty arrays, and I end up a whole load of empty variables, or variables set to 0, and then I push this into the array, and then I iterate over the array. There's my array total, and then each one that I step through, I add to this sum total 1 variable. I then do the same thing depending on the category. So if it's the food category, push it into there. If it's the house category, put it into this array. And then in the end, I got one called some house. So that's actually how, and then I do a string literal at the end through there and push all of those things into those particular items. Now, one thing that's coming through when I'm doing the ParseFloat, which is the decimal point, this thing here goes wacky. Now, if we actually look in those codes, and I actually just filter these by, what am I filtering by? Category, apply. If you actually look at my health ones, both of them actually just have the 2 decimal point, but for some unknown reason, it starts spitting out this weird number through here. So I might, instead of actually doing ParseFloat on them, do ParseInt, which all it'll do is it'll round everything up to the nearest dollar value. I don't know if it rounds up or down, but it'll actually do a rounding anyway, which is more than adequate for what I actually want. So I've now got my sum values through to there. So from the point of view of that, I've got through to, I've done the order, I've done the filter, and then I've got the sum total. And now I'm reflecting on this. I don't know whether I need this. The next 2 things I need to do is do a forecasting, and I need to do a dashboard. Now, I just want to go back to this app and just talk about this one. This one, I really wanted this to be my front screen, the dashboard, so I've got a heads up of where I am at a particular time in the month as to do. So I've got the forecast of bills, how much I spent to date, etc., etc., etc. Then I can go through each of the categories, and then I can actually say whether I paid it or not. So I can actually go through here. I wonder if I can do it from that level. No, I can't. If I go through at this level here, petrol for buy, I can actually do whether it's been paid or not. So I can actually add a switch through there and say yes, so that I can actually, so my front dashboard changed on whether it's been paid or not. So I can see how I'm actually managing those sorts of things. Now, there's a couple of ways that I can do this. So, of course, I've got to try and do it in the most bloody hard way possible at this point in time. And then I've reflected on this. So, a couple of things here. My home screen on my Glide app is actually this one here, which actually gives me all the information of what I spent already, which doesn't really do anything. The reason I have this is because I actually want to get to this point here to be able to add in a new transaction or a new amount coming through. And because it takes a while to refresh that screen and then come over to that screen and then come through and do that, I actually just made this one my home screen. So it's not actually what I want. Now, in all due respect to Glide, I can now change that layout, because now instead of just a list, I can go into details and I can put my dashboard information at the front here, and then I can go for an inline list and put a couple of these down here, and have that button accessible through there. So I've sort of could have refined that as it is, but the reason I'm going to a progressive web app is because it's so much faster, because it works offline. So I still want to persevere with this over what I've actually got in my Glide app. And the challenge is that it's costing me a lot more in coding. This bit of coding here, this little thing here, has cost me a day and a half, or it's going to cost me 2 days to actually get that far. But now I've done it, I know how to do it. So that's an extra bit of learning that I've got through there. And now I've learned a little bit about noSQL databases that I didn't know before. So that's quite good. So the next part that I suddenly thought, well, let's see how I can do this. So the next part is to actually do a forecast page. So the forecast page is what I want to do is to be able to add things through, have a list of pull downs of things that I actually want to add for each month. Well, if we just go and look at my expenses at this point in time, what I actually do is I go into the back end at the moment inside GlideApps, and I actually go into the Google Sheets, and then I switch on all of the ones that I do. And I've got things like here, electricity for week 5, because there's sometimes when you actually have an extra, as a month is, a week is only 4 weeks, 28 days. Sometimes you end up with almost another week on the end of the month. So sometimes you've got to add a little bit more for another week of stuff coming through, whether you're budgeting for it that week or not. So there's things like that. There's also things that happen quarterly. There's things that only happen once a month, like you pay your broadband or you pay your phone top up or something like that. Then you've actually got one-off things which like your insurance for the house, where it'll only happen once a year, but it happens in a specific month. So you need to add those. So I want to try and do a lot of those front end. Now, the simple way of what I'm actually going to do in the next video is actually just look at just putting numbers through here. So I'm going to make some forecast numbers and just say for food, this amount, so that I can actually do a basic comparison. Later on, I actually want to be able to maybe, and I might do this at this point in time, is make another collection called forecast, and then for a month, and then actually add all of the items on. At this point in time, I might just do total numbers that I actually want. So on each category, I actually have a total number that I do so that I can do a comparison. That keeps it simple, and it also speeds the app on. Later on, I can go through and refine that, because the next one that I actually really want to get on to do is to do, if we just go through and look at the, I've lost him now, here, this has got cool little dashboardy things. So this is the bit that I actually want to see. It's a bit of a fun one, is to see what I can do. Now, maybe some bar charts or maybe some graphs or something like that. These are actually just images that are actually going through and are getting generated inside GlideApps, and it saves it as an image and then brings it up. I'd like to see if I can do something a bit interesting through there. So that's somewhere that I'd like to go and play with. So that's the forecast and the dashboard that we're going through. So this has been a challenge. It's taken me 2 days to get these sums because of that. Now, again, working with noSQL database, if you've got an SQL database, you can actually compare different tables using inner joins and outer joins and all sorts of things and stuff. I don't know how to do that in a noSQL, so I persevere with this. I almost gave up on this noSQL thing, and I was actually set up some tables inside a MySQL database on my VPS to actually rebuild this app linking to an SQL database instead. And that was going to be quite interesting from the point of view of just doing a PWA that links to an SQL database rather than a noSQL one. But I thought, no, I'll stick with this as a learning just from the point of view of the learning on the noSQL, because that's another thing I want to learn as well as the PWA, of having the flexibility, of having a knowledge of just how they behave. Again, the other thing later on is that I'd like to refine those inside the expensive ones through here. So inside this one, what I actually want to do is this materialize. Now, we use the materialize ones to actually choose options on the previous one for actually selecting which category we were in, which shop we were doing, etc., which is quite good because you get clean data each time. So you're not actually going to misspell anything if you're just doing pull down things. They're easy to use on the phone. But there's also this seriously cool thing which you can pull down multiples. So instead of actually pulling down, I can actually end up with a whole list of things that I actually have that I can push in. So this was really cool. So when I was actually doing this, unfortunately, it does something weird on my PC, and if we just pull down this one, you see these ones actually have this list through here. On my phone, I've actually got radio buttons through here, so I can choose those. And if I've got this multiple one through here, I can choose multiple buttons through there. So that means I can push multiple things into a database. Now, I think that's going to be a bit complicated, and I really want to move on to doing the pretty with the dashboard. So I think what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go through, make another collection called forecast, and I think I'm going to call it Forecast X because it's going to be a dummy one that later on I'm going to end up with something a little bit more sophisticated. But it's almost like that's an extra that you can add on, because this, at this point in time, this app works. With a bit of forecasting, I just need some forecasting data. Then I've got this. I just need to compare two bits of information. At the moment with this particular app, if I add an expense through here, if I add that, no, it's not going to let me do it. Good, because I've still got the 2 points in there. If I add that one, and I'm just going to choose a couple of things, and I send that one in. It doesn't like it there. I've got to go and click there and go and click. I'm there. Enter. No, it's got to go there. Because I'm splitting my screen up, and I'm doing 2 lots of reads. I'm pulling information in. So I'm pulling this information in from my DB. And I'm doing one thing where I'm doing this render expenses X, and then I'm doing another pulling the snapshot on that collection through in here. Then I'm rendering this and this onto the same point, which is this grey container. So this is the grey text container. So because I'm doing that, it gets a little bit confused with itself. So at the moment, if I go through and I add something or I delete something, it's only showing one. So it isn't showing me the whole summary of all of the ones that I want. But then again, if I reformat this app, all I want on my front is to be able to access this really quickly to add another transaction in. And then I can do on here, I can actually have my display of forecast versus actual expenditure and things like that. So again, I can get that other information back by doing a refresh. And if I actually hit that button there, you see everything disappears. Now I've just got to do a refresh. Now from the point of view of the actual phone, this is not an issue because all you need to do is just do a little stroke, and that's a straight down for that for doing that there. So I'm having to, as I'm going through and developing this, I'm actually rethinking the app overall and actually how I use it. And that's one thing which I love about design in a way, is that you start off with a brief about what you're actually meant to do. And my brief when I started off, and I started to write my own one here, of what my expectations were, and the beginning was to actually make mine and order the list and filter the list and do all of this. And in fact, that isn't what I want. What I wanted and what I originally wanted on here was the dashboard. And so I'm suddenly thinking, well, I'm just building this, and suddenly this isn't what I need. I still want all of this data, and I can actually just put all of this information onto another page. But what I actually want to do is show here. Now, again, one of the things that I've got here, if I've got something that isn't, I've got $120 worth of stuff here that isn't allocated to a particular category. So I've got a bit of a problem there, is that could be, I could be overspending on something and underspending somewhere else. So I'm going to need an edit button at some point in time. I've got my trash button there, and I'm going to need an edit button to be able to, instead of blowing an item away and completely refilling it in again, because my date will be wrong, it'll update it saying, well, I can actually go in and edit a certain one. So that one said it's 75. That one's got a category in there. There's another 75 one here. You can see there's no category. So if I had an edit button, I can actually just go and update that one to what I need to do there. So that, in my whole schema of things, is towards the bottom of what I do. But maybe my forecast tab, I will actually add further down here, and actually do another forecast there, and I can actually just put simple forecast tab at this point in time. So that's where I got to. Again, I wanted to do this video because I had a disastrous time. And if you look at where this app is here, and you look at where this is, it hasn't moved along all that far. But that was a real challenge. And this is, again, I've been watching these YouTube videos, and people, they just chuck things into the Firebase, and they were chucking these numbers in. And then they were talking about the numbers as if they were doing something with them. But you couldn't do anything with the Firebase. So to me, I think they were just simplifying and glossing over things. This was really very painful, and it took me a long while to figure that out. So it's really, I hope my videos are more practical for people who are trying to do these things. And it's for the people who are semi-experienced, sort of have a notion of where do you need to do, but then you fall over on things. And the whole docs I didn't find very helpful. So there's something happening in my code to do with this DOM action through here, that something's happening through there that's not doing it. It might be this event prevent default, and I'm not too sure why he's using that in there, because the default for that might be a number, and maybe that's stopping that from happening. I don't know. As I said, I did do a test to actually on an earlier version to actually put in a number, and the number comes through. So the number's not coming through there. And if I do a console log out here, it doesn't seem to show me what I need. So I'm still figuring that one out, because in the fullness of time, I'd like to understand that database better, so that if I actually want to put numbers in there, I can put numbers in there. The other thing is there, because I'm actually coming out with the numbers, and I'm in my in here, this ParseFloat is going nutty. Does that mean that I've got to actually do something to round it in a way and put another function on top of that one to do some rounding? Maybe in here I've actually got to get the variable y and round to 2 decimal places or something. And it's sort of just another iteration that it'd be nice to be able to know how to do it elegantly rather than crudely. Anyway, I hope that's been of interest to you. Hopefully the next one, it doesn't look as if we've done too much in the way of pretty at this point in time, but that now gives us data that we can actually start doing comparing with, and that then allows us to then get onto the dashboard and start looking at what way can I display it on my site. And especially since the fact that if we've got it in here as in some cache, we can actually put something that does a table in there. We can just go and get a minified something that just does tables. I'd like to actually try and keep this as small as possible, and in fact there's something that I want to explore later on, of just what size cache I'm actually pushing into these. That I'm looking forward to doing, but the next one is really just getting the whatever it is that I'm trying to do. I'm going to find it through there, the forecasting part. So I hope that's been of interest to you. If it is of interest, can you please give a thumbs up? Also think about subscribing. I've got a Patreon site. It would be great if you could actually become a patron and help support me doing these sorts of things. And if not, Op Panyaha. Thank you very much for watching.